The Silent Veil, Part 1. Chapter 1, The Letter from the Dead. The storm had rolled in without warning. Lenora Ashbourne stood at the window of her small cottage, watching as blackened clouds strangled the moon, the wind howling through the trees outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating the jagged moors beyond. It had been months since Black Veil Manor burned to the ground. Months since Sebastian Ravenshade perished in the flames. Months since she and Edgar had walked away, leaving the past buried in its own ashes. And yet, the past had never truly left her. Lenora inhaled deeply, forcing her mind to settle. Edgar was not home tonight, gone into town for supplies. The house was silent except for the wind. Or at least, it had been. Then came the knock. A single, sharp rap against the door. Lenora froze. Her pulse quickened, her fingers tightening against the wooden frame of the window. She hadn't been expecting anyone. Another knock, louder this time, more urgent. Lenora exhaled, shaking off the unease curling in her stomach. She reached for the lantern on the nearby table, its glow casting flickering shadows against the walls. Slowly, she approached the door. Her fingers hesitated on the iron latch. Then, she opened it. A rush of cold, damp air swept into the cottage. But no one was there. The night stretched empty before her, the rain beginning to drizzle over the misty moors. Then, she looked down. A single envelope lay on the doorstep. Water droplets clung to the parchment, but the wax seal remained unbroken, a seal that sent a violent shudder through Lenora's spine. A black raven. The Ravenshade crest. Her breath caught. This was impossible. Black Veil was gone. Sebastian was dead. And yet, this letter had arrived. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the moorland beyond. Lenora snatched the letter from the ground, retreating quickly into the cottage. She bolted the door behind her, her heart hammering. With shaking fingers, she broke the wax seal. A single slip of parchment slid free. The ink was fresh. The handwriting was elegant, but unfamiliar. And the words sent ice down her spine, "The veil is thinning. She is not at peace. Come home." Lenora's breath shallowed. She did not need to ask who she was. Clara Ravenshade. But Clara's ghost had been laid to rest. Hadn't she? Lenora's pulse thundered in her ears. Someone wanted her to return. Someone wanted her to finish what had begun. And as she stared at the letter, the candle beside her flickered wildly, as though something unseen had passed through the room. A single whisper brushed against her ear. Soft. Familiar. It's not over. Lenora spun around. But the room was empty. Chapter 2, Shadows on the Moor. The storm raged through the night, but Lenora Ashbourne did not sleep. She sat at the wooden table, the dim glow of her lantern casting elongated shadows across the walls. The letter lay before her, the Ravenshade seal broken, its message etched into her mind. The veil is thinning. She is not at peace. Come home. She traced the inked words with trembling fingers. Come home. To where? Black Veil was gone. Burned to the ground. The past had been buried in the ashes of its own sin. And yet, here it was again, reaching out like a hand from the grave. A chill slithered down her spine. Was this a trick? Or something worse, a warning? A sudden gust of wind rattled the cottage window, making Lenora flinch. The candle flame shivered violently, throwing wild shapes against the walls. She turned toward the door, half expecting to hear another knock. But there was nothing. Only the howling wind. She exhaled shakily. She needed to think. She reached for the envelope, searching for a sender's name. There was none. Not a trace of who had written it. Not a clue. Her stomach twisted. Who else, other than Edgar, knew where she had gone? Evangeline? The girl had disappeared after Blackvale burned. She had always been strange, otherworldly in a way Lenora could never explain. But could a child have written this letter? Or was there another force at work? Lenora rose abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. She grabbed her cloak from the hook, throwing it over her shoulders. She needed air. She needed to see the moor. The rain had slowed to a fine mist, clinging to the earth like a ghostly veil. Lenora stepped onto the muddy path, her lantern casting only a weak glow against the dark expanse of the windswept moor. The land stretched empty before her, rolling hills swallowed by thick fog. She inhaled the cold night air, her breath visible in the damp. And then, a movement in the mist. Her pulse stilled. Something, someone, was there. A figure stood at the edge of the moor, half obscured by fog. Tall. Unmoving. Watching. The lantern flickered violently in her grip. Lenora's throat tightened. Who's there? Silence. The figure did not answer. It did not move. Just stood. The wind carried a faint whisper, threading through the mist. Come home. Lenora's stomach clenched. Her fingers tightened around the lantern, the metal handle suddenly ice cold. Another flash of movement. The figure vanished. Lenora's breath came in sharp bursts. It was gone. No sound. No footprints in the damp soil. Nothing. A trick of the fog. Or, had something truly been there? She turned back toward the cottage, her pulse thrumming against her ribs. She had felt it. A presence. A familiar one. Not Edgar. Not Sebastian. Not even Evangeline. Something else. A voice she had not heard since the night Blackvale had burned. It's not over. Lenora shuddered. She did not know who had sent the letter. She did not know who, or what, stood in the mist. But one thing was certain. Blackvale Manor was gone. But its ghosts were not. And now, they were calling her back. Chapter 3, The Ravenshade Legacy. The morning sun barely pierced the thick grey clouds hanging over the moors, casting a dull, lifeless glow over the damp earth. The events of the previous night clung to Lenora Ashbourne like a second skin. The letter. The figure in the mist. The whisper that had no source. She had spent the rest of the night awake, the candlelight flickering against her tired eyes as she tried to rationalize what had happened. But reason held no place in a world where ghosts still whispered. Lenora turned from the window, her fingers grazing the envelope once more. She had made her decision. She needed answers. She needed to find Edgar Ravenshade. The town of Ravenshade Hollow sat nestled against the edge of the moors, its crooked chimneys spilling ribbons of smoke into the cold morning air. It was here that Edgar and Lenora had rebuilt their lives, or at least, tried to. But Edgar had never truly escaped Blackvale's shadow. Lenora knew it the moment she saw him. He stood at the edge of the old stone bridge, staring at the waters below, his dark coat billowing slightly in the wind. His figure was rigid, unmoving, as if caught in the pull of something unseen. Lenora hesitated before stepping forward. Edgar. He did not turn. For a long moment, he simply watched the water ripple. Then, finally, he spoke. It came for you, didn't it? Lenora's breath hitched. She tightened her grip on the letter, the Ravenshade seal still visible despite the crumpled paper. You knew. A hollow chuckle left his lips. Of course. Finally, he turned to her. His dark eyes, once so full of fire and defiance, now held a quiet exhaustion. The weight of everything, his stolen years, Clara's death, Sebastian's betrayal, still lingered in the depths of his expression. Lenora took a slow step closer. Who sent this? Edgar's jaw tensed. I don't know. Lenora exhaled sharply. But you knew it would come. He nodded. Black Veil may be gone, but its curse was never bound to its walls. A bitter wind swept between them, stirring the trees at the edge of the village. Lenora studied him carefully. And now it's calling us back. Edgar didn't answer. Not at first. Then, he reached into his coat pocket. And pulled out another letter. Lenora's pulse quickened. It was nearly identical to hers. Same parchment. Same black wax seal. And the message inside? It was only 3 words. Come find me. Lenora's blood ran cold. Edgar held her gaze. I think you know who it's from. They took shelter in the small tavern at the heart of Ravenshade Hollow, where the fire burned low in the hearth and the scent of aged oak lingered in the air. Lenora and Edgar sat in the farthest corner, away from the murmuring locals and the clink of ale mugs. The letters lay between them, the 2 black seals like twin shadows against the wooden table. Edgar sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I should have expected this. Lenora folded her arms. Why? His expression darkened. Because I am still a Ravenshade. Lenora studied him. You were supposed to be dead. He gave her a wry smile, but there was no humor in it. Yes. And yet, here I am. His fingers traced the edge of the letter. And someone, or something, wants to remind me that I still have a claim. Lenora's heart pounded. A claim to what? Edgar's gaze sharpened. The estate. Lenora's stomach turned. But Black Veil. Black Veil was only one of our properties. Edgar's voice was low, unreadable. There is another house. Lenora's skin prickled. She had never thought about what remained of the Ravenshade fortune. The fire had taken Black Veil, but the name still held weight. And that weight was now pressing down on Edgar once more. Lenora exhaled slowly. Where? Edgar hesitated. Then, he finally spoke the name. Ravenshade House. Lenora shuddered. She had never heard of it. But the way Edgar said it, the way the name lingered in the air like a forbidden secret, sent a chill straight through her bones. You didn't tell me there was another house. Edgar's gaze flickered to the fire. Because I never wanted to go back. Lenora frowned. You've been there before. His jaw tightened. As a child. Before my father died. The fire crackled, filling the silence between them. Lenora licked her lips. And what's there now? Edgar's fingers tapped once against the table. A forgotten inheritance. The weight of his words settled over her. The letters had called them back. To a place neither of them knew. A house lost to time. And whatever waited inside, it knew them both. Lenora exhaled sharply. We have to go. Edgar's gaze snapped to hers. Are you sure? She hesitated, but only for a moment. She had been drawn into Black Veil's darkness once. Now, the shadows of Ravenshade House were reaching for them. And she would not run from them. Not this time. The wind howled against the cottage walls, whispering through the cracks. Lenora stood by the window, watching the moors vanish beneath a blanket of rolling mist. They would leave at dawn. But the night was not finished with her yet. A soft sound echoed from outside a distant creak. Lenora stiffened. She turned toward the door. And there, beneath the candlelight, she saw it. Another letter. It had been slid beneath the door. The wax seal was black. But this time, it was already broken. Lenora's stomach tightened. She reached for it slowly, her breath shallow as she unfolded the parchment. And in the same delicate handwriting, there was only one sentence. A single warning. You are not alone. The candle flame shuddered. And in the reflection of the window, a figure stood behind her. Chapter 4, The House of Hollow Graves. The candlelight flickered violently, casting erratic shadows across the cottage walls. Lenora Ashbourne's blood ran cold. A figure stood behind her. Her breath hitched. She did not move. The reflection in the window was unclear, distorted by the uneven glass and the faint glow of the flame. But the shape was unmistakable, tall, motionless, watching. Her fingers clenched around the letter, its wax seal already broken. You are not alone. Her heart hammered. Slowly, so slowly, she turned. The room behind her was empty. The air was thick, unmoving. Yet she could still feel it. A presence. Something unseen lingering in the shadows. Lenora inhaled shakily. Then, a gust of cold air brushed against her skin. A whisper followed. Go to him. The flame snapped out. Lenora staggered backward, her pulse roaring in her ears. The room was plunged into complete darkness, the only light coming from the moonlit moor beyond the window. She swallowed, forcing her breath to steady. She had seen enough ghosts to know, this was not a trick of the mind. The house was watching. And it was urging her toward Edgar. Dawn broke through a sky thick with gray clouds, the wind carrying the faint scent of rain across the moors. Lenora and Edgar Ravenshade stood at the edge of the cobblestone road, their bags packed beside them. A horse-drawn carriage waited in silence, its driver cloaked in black, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. He had not spoken a word. Lenora hesitated, glancing at Edgar. Are you certain? She asked softly. Edgar's dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. No. But still, he helped her into the carriage. They traveled for hours, the landscape shifting as they left the moors behind. The village of Ravenshade Hollow vanished into memory, replaced by twisting forests and mist-laden hills. Lenora watched the scenery pass, her fingers still curled around the mystery letter she had received the night before. You are not alone. The words chilled her more than she cared to admit. She turned to Edgar. Why did your family abandon Ravenshade House? Edgar exhaled, his gaze locked on the passing trees. Because they were afraid of it. Lenora's stomach twisted. Afraid? He hesitated, his fingers tightening against the leather seat. My father never spoke of it. But when I was a child, I heard whispers. Servants said Ravenshade House was wrong. Cursed. His jaw tensed. And that people who entered it didn't always return. Lenora's chest tightened. This was not just another estate. It was a place steeped in something dark. And now, it was calling them back. By the time the carriage came to a slow, shuddering halt, the sun was low in the sky, bathing the land in a dull golden haze. Lenora's breath hitched as she stepped out, her boots pressing against overgrown grass. Before them stood Ravenshade House. Massive. Silent. And waiting. The mansion was unlike Blackvale. Where Blackvale had been a place of Gothic decay, this house was preserved. The black iron gates stood tall, wrapped in overgrown ivy. The stone walls were untouched by time, the windows still intact. And yet, there was something wrong. Something unsettling. Because despite its pristine condition, no one had lived here in years. And yet, the front door was slightly ajar. As if someone had been expecting them. Lenora swallowed hard. She turned to Edgar, who stood rigid, unmoving. Edgar. His eyes were locked on the second-floor window. Lenora followed his gaze. And her blood turned to ice. A figure stood in the window. Watching. A woman. Her long dark hair curled over her shoulders, her dress a deep midnight blue. The same shade as Clara Ravenshade's gown. Lenora's breath hitched. No. The figure did not move. She did not blink. Then, the wind howled, and the door creaked open further. An invitation. Or a warning. Edgar finally spoke. She's waiting for us. Lenora's throat tightened. She did not need to ask who. She already knew. The dead had not finished their story. And Ravenshade House was ready to reveal its secrets. Chapter 5, A Name Written in Blood. The door of Ravenshade House stood open, waiting. A silent invitation. Or a warning. Lenora Ashbourne's pulse thundered as she stared up at the second-floor window where the figure had stood. A woman in a midnight blue gown. She was gone now. But Lenora could feel her. Edgar Ravenshade stood beside her, rigid, unmoving. His dark eyes remained fixed on the house, his jaw set with an expression Lenora couldn't quite place. Not just fear. Not just anger. But recognition. Edgar. She whispered. He exhaled slowly, as if waking from a trance. We go inside. Lenora hesitated. Are you sure? His gaze flickered to her, dark, haunted. We were always meant to. The wind moaned through the trees, rustling the ivy-strewn gates. Lenora took a step forward, and Ravenshade House swallowed them whole. The moment Lenora crossed the threshold, a wave of cold air washed over her. Not just the chill of an abandoned house. Something older. Deeper. The foyer was eerily untouched, as if someone had been tending to it all these years. No dust. No cobwebs. Only silence. A grand staircase loomed in the center, splitting into two sweeping paths leading to the second floor. Ornate chandeliers, long unlit, dangled like frozen ghosts above them. But Lenora's gaze drifted to the walls. And her breath caught. Paintings. Portraits of the Ravenshade lineage. Each one staring down at them, their gilded frames glinting dully in the dim afternoon light. Her stomach twisted. Because there, at the far end of the hall, hung a portrait she recognized all too well. Clara Ravenshade. Her painted eyes were hollow, dark, her midnight gown blending into the shadowy backdrop. Lenora's chest tightened. Had it always been here? Or had someone placed it here for them to find? We should check the rooms, Edgar said, his voice lower than usual. Lenora forced herself to nod. But as they moved forward, the air in the house seemed to shift. Not just the stillness of a place long forgotten. But as if the house itself was watching them. They searched the first floor, moving carefully through the hushed corridors. Most of the rooms had not changed, dusty armchairs, grand fireplaces, faded wallpaper curling at the edges. But then, they reached the library. And Lenora's pulse stilled. The double doors stood slightly ajar. As if someone had just been inside. A faint smell of parchment and candle wax filled the air. Edgar pushed the door open fully, stepping inside. Lenora followed. The room was massive, the shelves stretching high into the darkness. But it wasn't the books that made her breath catch. It was the desk at the center of the room. And the open book resting atop it. Lenora's boots creaked against the wooden floor as she approached, her fingers trembling as she reached for the brittle pages. The book was old, its leather binding cracked with age. But as her eyes scanned the text, she realized, this was not a normal ledger. It was a record of the Ravenshade bloodline. And it ended with Edgar's name. Her pulse pounded. She traced the final entry, her throat dry. Edgar Ravenshade, presumed dead, buried beneath the estate. Her stomach tightened. Buried beneath the estate. Her eyes darted to Edgar, who was scanning the book with a deep frown. I was never buried, he murmured. Lenora exhaled sharply. Then why does it say? A sound cut her off. A slow, deliberate creak. They both froze. The door to the library was closing. Not slammed. Not pushed by the wind. But slowly shutting, as if someone unseen was sealing them inside. Lenora's breath came in short, sharp bursts. We are not alone, she whispered. Edgar's jaw tightened. Then, the candle on the desk flickered. And in its glow, Lenora saw it. There, on the page beneath Edgar's name. A new entry was appearing. Ink bled onto the parchment, curling into delicate script before their very eyes. A name. A single name. Lenora Ashbourne. And beside it, to be buried soon. A chill raced through her veins. Edgar grabbed her wrist, his fingers cold, urgent. We need to go. Lenora stumbled backward, her breath ragged. The candle snuffed out. The door creaked open again, on its own. As if the house had changed its mind. Lenora swallowed down the panic clawing at her throat. Something, someone, had written her name in that book. Not a record of the dead. But a record of who would die next. And the house had already decided. They rushed back into the main hall, the air thick with something unseen. Lenora's skin prickled. The portraits along the walls felt different now. Their eyes seemed to follow her, their expressions twisting subtly in the dim light. Then, she saw it. A new addition to the grand foyer. A message. It had been written across the wooden floor. Dark, wet ink smeared in curling letters. No, not ink. Lenora's stomach churned. It was blood. And the words it formed were clear. You should never have come. A slow, aching dread settled deep in Lenora's bones. This house had been waiting for them. It had already begun its game. And someone was not ready to let them leave. Beyond the iron gates, shrouded in thick mist, a figure watched from the trees. A woman. Her midnight blue gown barely moved in the wind. Her dark eyes burned from beneath the veil covering her face. And when she turned, disappearing back into the shadows, the whisper carried with her. Soon. Chapter 6, Evangeline's Prophecy. The chill of Ravenshade House clung to Lenora Ashbourne long after she and Edgar had left the grand foyer behind. The message written in blood still echoed in her mind, you should never have come. Someone, or something, wanted them gone. But Lenora knew the truth. It was far too late to leave. The corridor leading to the east wing was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of a long unseen grandfather clock. Each step seemed to echo, swallowed into the walls as if the house itself was listening. Lenora clutched the lantern tightly, its dim glow pushing back the shadows creeping along the high ceilings. They passed a series of old, locked doors before stopping in front of one that had been left ajar. A child's room. Edgar hesitated. I remember this room, he murmured. Lenora turned to him. You do. His eyes remained fixed on the doorway. This belonged to someone I barely knew. A girl who stayed here, but... He frowned. I was never allowed to speak to her. A sudden wave of cold slid through the hallway. Lenora pushed the door open further. Inside, dust floated in the air, illuminated by thin streaks of light slipping through the moth-eaten curtains. The walls were lined with old toys, a small bed pushed into the corner, but the desk was what caught Lenora's attention. It was covered in sketches. Drawings scrawled across yellowed parchment, scattered in a messy, haphazard pile. Lenora stepped closer, lifting one carefully. Her breath hitched. The drawing was of a house. But not just any house. Blackvale Manor. Lenora's fingers trembled as she lifted another. A woman in a midnight blue gown. The lines were frantic, harsh, as if the artist had been desperate to capture something fleeting. She turned to Edgar, showing him the parchment. Who drew these? His brow furrowed. Then, his expression shifted. A flicker of recognition. Evangeline. Lenora's pulse stopped. Evangeline Ravenshade. The strange, unsettling child who had once whispered of things no one else could see. The one who had known about Clara before Lenora ever had. But Evangeline was gone. She had vanished the night Blackvale burned. Lenora turned back to the sketches, flipping through them frantically. Page after page, Blackvale. Clara. Edgar's name. Then, she found one last drawing. A woman with long, dark hair and a torn gown, standing at the gates of a house shrouded in fog. Lenora's heart clenched. It was her. Before she could react, a whisper curled through the air. He's still here. Lenora whipped around. But the room was empty. She turned to Edgar, her breath shallow. Did you hear that? His face was pale. Yes. Lenora. And Edgar left the nursery in silence. The moment they stepped back into the corridor, the temperature dropped sharply. The house was changing. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. Lenora gripped the sketches tightly. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Then, the grandfather clock chimed. A slow, deep sound, rattling through the hallways. Lenora shivered. It wasn't working before. Edgar's jaw tensed. Something woke it up. Then, the whisper came again. But this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was many. All murmuring at once, a tangled mess of voices, pleading, warning. Lenora clenched her teeth. And then, one voice rose above the rest. Soft. Childlike. The veil is thinning. A rush of ice flooded Lenora's veins. Evangeline. She whispered. The voices stopped. And then, a single sound echoed through the house. A sharp, violent knock. From behind the parlor doors. Edgar and Lenora exchanged a look. They moved toward the parlor slowly, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against them. Edgar hesitated, then pushed open the door. Lenora gasped. There, standing in the middle of the parlor, was a single wooden chair. And sitting in it, was a doll. Dressed in a miniature version of a midnight blue gown. Lenora took a step closer, her stomach twisting. The doll's porcelain face was cracked. And in its tiny hands, it held a folded slip of parchment. Lenora reached for it carefully, her pulse hammering. She unfolded the note. And there, scrawled in familiar handwriting, was Evangeline's message. The house is waking up. He is watching. And he is hungry. Lenora staggered backward. A gust of cold wind slammed the parlor doors shut, rattling the walls. The doll tipped over, crashing to the floor. Lenora's breathing turned shallow. She turned to Edgar, her hands shaking. Who is he? Edgar's face was pale as death. I don't know. The lantern flame flickered wildly. A deep, slow creak echoed from upstairs. Someone, or something, was moving above them. Lenora inhaled sharply, gripping Edgar's hand. Whatever had been trapped in Ravenshade House. It was awake now. And it knew they were here. Chapter 7, The Room That Shouldn't Exist. The creak from upstairs sent a violent shudder through Lenora Ashbourne's spine. Something was moving above them. Something that should not be there. The note from Evangeline still trembled in her fingers. The house is waking up. He is watching. And he is hungry. Lenora turned to Edgar Ravenshade, whose face was drawn in pale, unreadable lines. He stood still, his dark eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if he could hear something beyond what she could. A second creak. Then another. Slow. Deliberate. Footsteps. But not normal ones. These were heavy. Dragging. Lenora's stomach twisted violently. "Edgar," she whispered. He nodded once. "We have to go up there." The grand staircase loomed before them, its wooden banister gleaming dully under the faint glow of the lantern. The upper levels of Ravenshade House had remained untouched since their arrival. But something waited for them now. The air grew thicker with every step they climbed, pressing against Lenora's chest like the weight of a forgotten memory. At the top of the staircase, the hallway stretched before them, long and shrouded in unnatural shadow. The portraits along the walls seemed darker than before, their painted eyes following every movement. And then, Lenora noticed it. A door at the end of the corridor. It was slightly open. A thin strip of blackness yawned beyond it. Lenora's breath hitched. "That wasn't open before," Edgar murmured. She swallowed. "Was it even here before?" He did not answer. Lenora lifted the lantern, casting a dim glow down the corridor. The light did not reach the end. It was as if the darkness was swallowing it whole. A slow, faint whisper curled through the air. Lenora froze. "It's waiting." She turned sharply. The whisper had come from inside the room. Edgar's grip tightened around her wrist. "We go together." Lenora nodded, forcing a breath into her lungs. Then, they stepped forward. The moment they entered, the air changed. The warmth of the house vanished, replaced by a cold so deep it gnawed at the bone. Lenora inhaled sharply, her breath visible in the lantern glow. The room was wrong. Not just abandoned. Not just forgotten. But impossible. It was too big, far larger than the dimensions of the house should have allowed. The walls stretched high, vanishing into a ceiling lost in darkness. There were no windows. Only a single object sat in the center of the room. A chair. And upon it, a figure. Lenora's blood ran cold. The figure sat motionless, their head bowed low, hair draping over their face like a curtain. They wore black. The edges of their coat were frayed, their fingers limp against the armrests. They did not move. Did not breathe. But Lenora felt them watching. "Who is that?" she whispered. Edgar did not answer. He stepped forward. "Wait," Lenora reached for him, but it was too late. He was already crossing the room. The figure remained still. Unmoving. Edgar stopped just a few feet away. Then, he spoke. "Sebastian." Lenora's stomach lurched. No. It couldn't be. Sebastian Ravenshade had died. She had watched him fall in the fire. Watched him burn with black veil. And yet, the figure in the chair slowly lifted its head. Lenora couldn't breathe. The face that met hers was ruined. Half burned. Scarred beyond recognition. But the eyes. The eyes were still Sebastian's. And they were smiling. Lenora's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. Sebastian Ravenshade should not be here. He should not be breathing. And yet, his burned lips curled into a mocking smirk. Surprised? Edgar's face was a mask of unreadable emotion. "You're dead." Sebastian laughed. A low, rasping sound, thick with a darkness Lenora had never heard before. "Am I?" Lenora's chest tightened. The room around them shuddered. The air crackled. And the lantern in her hand flickered violently. Sebastian tilted his head, his charred skin pulling against his cheekbones. "You should not have come, Lenora." His voice was not his own. It was layered, as if something else was speaking beneath it. Lenora took a slow step backward. She could feel it now. The presence behind his voice. It was not just Sebastian sitting in that chair. Something else was in this house. Something far older. Far hungrier. Sebastian exhaled slowly. "You see it, don't you?" His smile widened. "This house, it is not what you think." Lenora's skin prickled. Sebastian leaned forward. "And neither am I." Then, the room collapsed. The walls shattered like glass, the ceiling vanishing into a spiraling abyss. The lantern in Lenora's hands died instantly. And in the absolute blackness, a whisper curled through the air. A voice older than time itself. "I have been waiting for you." Lenora screamed. The house stood still once more. The parlor doors, long shut, creaked open on their own. The doll on the floor tipped upright. And somewhere, deep within the belly of the estate, a new name was added to the Ravenshade record. Chapter 8, A Whisper Beneath the Floorboards. Lenora woke up screaming. The sound ripped through the darkness, echoing against the high, cavernous walls. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her pulse a frantic hammering against her ribs. Where was she? The chair. Sebastian. The whisper in the dark. It had swallowed her whole. But now, she was somewhere else. The lantern's flame had snuffed out completely, leaving only the faintest sliver of moonlight seeping through the window. Lenora's hands trembled as she pressed them against the cold wooden floor, trying to steady herself. She wasn't in the impossible room anymore. She was back in one of the upstairs corridors. But something was wrong. The walls, which had once been lined with dusty portraits and elegant wallpaper, were now bare and rotting, the plaster peeling away in long, curling strips. The air was thick with dampness, carrying a faint, unsettling scent of decay and earth. Lenora exhaled sharply. Had she imagined it? Had she lost time? Then, a noise. A slow, scratching sound, like nails dragging against wood. Lenora froze. The sound was coming from beneath her. She turned her gaze downward, her fingers hovering over the wooden floorboards. The scratching grew louder. Faster. Something was beneath the floor. Lenora's stomach twisted violently. Her breath hitched as she pressed her palm against the floorboards. And beneath her touch, something tapped back. A slow, deliberate knock from the other side. Lenora jerked away, her skin crawling. She stared at the floor, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Another knock. Then, a whisper. Muffled. Distant. "Let me out." Lenora choked on her breath. She scrambled backward, her pulse pounding. The voice was familiar. And then, it spoke again. "Lenora, help me." Her entire body went rigid. It was Evangeline. Lenora forced herself to move. She crawled forward, her fingers skimming along the wooden planks. They were warped with age, some loose beneath her touch. She grabbed the nearest lantern, relighting it with shaky hands. As the flame flickered to life, she finally saw it. The floorboards beneath her were stained. Dark, uneven patches of something dried long ago. Lenora gagged. It was blood. Her breathing came quick and shallow, her fingers tightening around the edges of the floorboards. She pressed her weight against them. And with a slow, aching creak, one of the boards shifted. Lenora's stomach coiled in terror. She dug her fingernails into the edges, prying the loose plank up with trembling hands. A sharp, damp scent hit her nose. Earth. Old wood. Decay. Beneath the floor, there was no foundation. No stone. Only a hollow space. Lenora lifted the lantern, her breath caught in her throat as she peered into the darkness below. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the empty space, the scent of damp soil. And then, she saw it. A small, delicate hand. Pale. Still. Buried beneath the earth. Lenora's scream never left her throat. She jerked back, the lantern shaking in her grip. No. No, this wasn't possible. Her vision blurred, panic clawing at her chest. She had seen this before. A body beneath the floor. But that had been Clara. This was Evangeline. And she was still reaching for her. Lenora did not know how long she sat there, her hands trembling against the floor. The hand beneath the floorboards was motionless now. The scratching had stopped. The whisper had faded. But she knew what she had seen. Knew what she had heard. Evangeline Ravenshade was beneath the house. And she was not at rest. A loud creak echoed through the corridor, snapping Lenora's attention to the door. Someone was coming. She scrambled to her feet, heart racing. Edgar. She had to find Edgar. She staggered toward the doorway, barely aware of her own movements. She had to tell him, had to make him believe her. She reached for the door handle, and then, the whisper returned. Don't go. Lenora's entire body went rigid. The whisper was right beside her ear. Soft. Breathless. She turned, her breath frozen in her lungs. And in the dim, flickering glow of the lantern, she saw the reflection in the window. A girl stood right behind her. Her dress was tattered, covered in dirt. Her skin was pale, bruised. And her eyes were blackened pits. Lenora's scream tore through the house. She spun around, but the girl was gone. Only the whisper remained. Find me before he does. Lenora staggered into the hallway, her hands shaking violently. She did not stop running. Did not stop moving through the endless corridors of Ravenshade House. She didn't know who he was. Didn't know how Evangeline had been buried beneath the floors. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This house was not a home. It was a graveyard. And it was not finished collecting the dead. Deep beneath Ravenshade House, buried under layers of stone and time, something stirred. A locked door groaned against its hinges. Chains rattled. And in the suffocating blackness, a voice spoke from the shadows. She found the first one. A low chuckle followed. Soon, she will find the others. And then, the whisper curled through the dark. Then she will join them. Chapter 9, The Masked Stranger. The halls of Ravenshade House seemed to shift and breathe as Lenora ran, the candlelight flickering wildly in her grip. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She had seen Evangeline's hand beneath the floor. Had heard the whisper in her ear. And now, the voice that lived in the dark had given her a warning. Find me before he does. But who was he? And why did Lenora feel like she was already running out of time? Lenora's boots skidded against the wooden floors, her breath coming in short gasps as she turned sharply down the corridor. She had to find Edgar. He had to know. He had to believe her. She reached the west wing, the oldest part of the manor, where the walls were warped with age, the windows long hidden beneath dust-streaked curtains. Then, she stopped. At the end of the hallway, a door stood partially open. It had not been opened before. Lenora swallowed hard. The air here was different, colder than the rest of the house, thick with something unspoken. A strange, metallic scent clung to the air. Damp. Rusted. And as Lenora stepped closer, the candlelight caught something on the floor. A trail of dirt. No. Not dirt. Dried blood. A slow, crawling chill wrapped around her spine. Someone, or something, had been dragged through this hall. She hesitated at the threshold. The door groaned softly under its own weight. Inside, the room was bare. No furniture. No windows. Only dust-covered floors and walls that seemed to stretch too far into the shadows. And at the center, a single chair. Lenora's breath hitched. Someone was sitting in it. The figure was motionless, their face hidden behind a mask. Lenora gripped the candle tighter. The mask was made of ivory, smooth and expressionless, covering the entire face. The eyes, black holes of nothingness. The body beneath it was draped in black, the coat tailored in a way that suggested wealth and power. But the hands, Lenora's stomach tightened. They were wrong. Long, too thin, the veins visible beneath sickly pale skin. And then, the head tilted toward her. A sharp, unnatural jerk. Lenora took a step back. "Who are you?" she whispered. The masked figure said nothing. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then, a whisper slithered through the room. "Do you know where you are, Miss Ashbourne?" Lenora's breath caught. The voice didn't come from the man in the mask. It came from behind her. She whipped around. No one was there. But the candlelight flickered violently, as if something had passed through the air. She turned back to the masked man, but he was gone. The chair sat empty. Only the mask remained, resting on the wooden seat. Lenora staggered back. Impossible. She had never heard him move. Never seen him rise. But he had vanished into thin air. And yet, the feeling of being watched did not leave. Lenora's hands shook as she stepped forward. She bent down, hesitating before picking up the mask. It was ice cold. And as she turned it over in her hands, she saw something etched into the inside. A name. Written in small, elegant script. Her stomach dropped. Edgar Ravenshade. Lenora's throat went dry. Why would Edgar's name be inside this mask? She turned to leave, but something caught her eye. In the farthest corner of the room, half buried beneath a tattered rug, was a wooden trapdoor. A way down. Lenora hesitated. The whisper returned. Before he does. She dropped the mask and rushed toward the trapdoor. Her fingers pried against the rusted handle, pulling it open with a loud, groaning creak. A cloud of cold, damp air swept into the room. And beyond the opening, only darkness. A passageway beneath Ravenshade House. A grave in the earth. Lenora grabbed the candle and took a slow, shuddering breath. She didn't have a choice. She had to go down. The steps beneath the trapdoor were carved from stone, slick with moisture. Lenora moved slowly, the candle's flame barely reaching the walls around her. The air grew thicker, suffocating, as if the very earth was pressing in around her. She reached the bottom. And what she saw sent ice through her blood. Rows of coffins. Not in a tomb. Not in a burial site. But in a hidden chamber beneath the house. A secret crypt. Lenora's hand tightened around the candle. Most of the coffins were closed, their wooden lids sealed with iron nails. But one, at the very end of the room, was open. Lenora swallowed hard. She stepped forward, the boards creaking beneath her weight. She peered inside. And her heart stopped. Inside the coffin was a dress. A gown of deep midnight blue. And on top of the fabric, a single silver locket. Lenora recognized it instantly. It was Clara Ravenshade's. She had seen it before. Held it in her hands. But Clara's body had never been found. Only this. Only the gown and the locket. A message. A warning. Then. The air shifted. A presence behind her. She turned too slowly. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth. And the candle died. The masked stranger stood in the parlor, watching the flames flicker in the empty hearth. In his pale fingers, he turned over an old, rusted key. The whisper curled through the silence. She found it. A pause. A slow, deliberate smile. Good. And then, he vanished into the shadows. Chapter 10, A Pact with the Unseen. Darkness swallowed Lenora Ashbourne whole. A hand clamped over her mouth, its grip cold as death. The candle was snuffed out, plunging her into the suffocating blackness of the crypt beneath Ravenshade House. Her pulse thundered, her lungs burning as she struggled against the unseen figure. Her captor held fast. Then, a voice. Low. Silken. Do not scream. Lenora's blood ran cold. The whisper was not human. It slid through the air like smoke, curling into her ears, seeping into her bones. The grip over her mouth eased slightly. Not to release her, but to make her listen. If you scream, they will come. Lenora froze. Who? She whispered against the hand. A pause. Then, a single answer. The ones who live in the walls. A slow, paralyzing dread crept through Lenora's veins. She did not want to know who they were. But something deep inside her already did. The hand withdrew, leaving behind a trace of unnatural cold against Lenora's skin. She staggered backward, her breath uneven. The figure remained unseen, standing just beyond the reach of her senses. Yet she felt him. Watching. Waiting. A presence too still, too composed, like a shadow given form. Lenora reached into the darkness, searching blindly for the candle she had dropped. But before she could touch it, a flame blossomed before her eyes. Soft, golden light flickered to life, illuminating the crypt. Lenora's breath hitched. Because the candle was not hers. The flame floated in the air, untouched by human hands. Then, the light revealed him, the masked stranger. Lenora's body tensed as she took in the figure before her. It was the same man from the chair upstairs. The one who had vanished without a sound. The ivory mask concealed his face, its smooth surface reflecting the candle's glow. Only his eyes were visible, dark, unfathomable, glinting with something too knowing. His coat was black and elegant, lined with silver thread, as if he had stepped from the pages of a forgotten century. But the air around him was wrong. He did not breathe. Did not shift. Did not even blink. As if he was not truly here. Or as if he was waiting to be remembered. Lenora found her voice. Who are you? The masked man tilted his head slightly, as if considering her question. Then, finally, he spoke. A keeper of secrets. His voice was low, smooth as silk. But there was something else beneath it, a second voice, barely a whisper, speaking in unison with his own. Something ancient. Lenora's skin prickled. What do you want? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The masked man stepped closer. It is not what I want, Miss Ashbourne. His gloved fingers brushed the coffin beside him, tracing the edge of the midnight blue gown resting inside. It is what you have already chosen. Lenora's stomach twisted. I chose nothing. The stranger let out a soft, dark chuckle. Did you not? He turned his gaze toward her, his mask catching the candlelight. You came back to a house that does not want to be found. You uncovered a grave that was meant to be forgotten. You heard her voice. His head tilted slightly. You let her in. Lenora's throat tightened. Evangeline. The masked man gave a slow, deliberate nod. She has been waiting. A slow chill wrapped around Lenora's spine. For what? The air shifted. A whisper slithered between them, ghostly, distant. For you to make a choice. Lenora's fingernails dug into her palms. A choice. The masked man turned, extending his gloved hand toward the open coffin. A pact. Lenora's breath shallowed. The coffin sat open, waiting. The midnight blue gown lay undisturbed, the silver locket resting atop the fabric like an unspoken invitation. The masked man's fingers curled slightly, gesturing toward it. This belonged to Clara. Lenora's hands trembled. I know. No, the masked man murmured. You. Do not. Lenora swallowed. What do you mean? The stranger's voice was almost gentle. You believe Clara is at peace. You are wrong. The words pierced through her chest. That is not possible, Lenora whispered. I saw her, you saw what she wanted you to see. A heavy silence stretched between them. Then, the masked man spoke again. Do you wish to know the truth, Miss Ashbourne? Lenora's throat went dry. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She had come here for answers. She had followed the whispers, the letters, the visions. Now, the truth was being offered to her. But at what cost? The masked man extended his hand toward her. You must make a pact, Lenora. You must choose to see what others have buried. To hear what has been silenced. And once you do, there is no turning back. The candle's flame flickered violently, as if it, too, sensed the weight of this moment. Lenora's breath shook. She knew she should refuse. She knew that whatever this was, it was dangerous. But she also knew, if she did not take his hand, she would never know the truth. And the house would never let her go. Her fingers trembled as she reached forward. She hesitated, only for a moment. Then, she took his hand. A searing cold shot through her veins. The crypt vanished around her. The darkness shattered. And in its place, a new vision took form. One that had been waiting for centuries to be seen. Edgar Ravenshade stood alone in the west wing, his fingers tightening into fists. Something was wrong. Lenora was missing. And deep in the walls of Ravenshade House, something had shifted. A voice rose from the shadows, soft and knowing. She has made her choice. A slow chill coiled around Edgar's spine. And now, she will belong to the house. Chapter 11, The Moonlit Seance. Darkness rushed into Lenora's mind like a flood. The moment she clasped the masked man's hand, reality fractured. She was no longer in the crypt. No longer in Ravenshade House as she knew it. She was somewhere else. Somewhere older. Deeper. A place where whispers lived, and time unraveled. A place where the past refused to die. And then, the vision began. The world shifted around her. The cold earth beneath her vanished, replaced by the smooth surface of polished marble floors. The damp, rotting walls of Ravenshade House were gone. Instead, Lenora stood in the grand ballroom, surrounded by flickering candlelight and the sound of laughter. Gaslight chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a warm golden glow over the room. The scent of jasmine and aged wine filled the air, the hum of a haunting waltz floating from an unseen string quartet. The house was alive again. And Lenora was standing in its past. Her breath hitched. Guests moved around her, dressed in fine silks and velvet, their voices carrying in soft murmurs of gossip and delight. And at the center of it all, Clara Ravenshade. Lenora's heart stopped. She was there, alive, radiant, untouched by time. Her dark curls cascaded over her shoulders, her midnight blue gown shimmering beneath the candlelight. But there was something wrong. Her smile did not reach her eyes. And when she laughed, it sounded hollow, as if she was playing a role rather than truly living in this moment. Lenora stepped forward, drawn to her. But before she could call out, a hand gripped her wrist. She gasped, twisting sharply. The masked man stood beside her. "You are seeing what was never meant to be seen." Lenora's pulse pounded. "Why are you showing me this?" The masked man tilted his head. "Because you chose to see." His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "Watch closely, Miss Ashbourne. You are about to witness the night Clara died." The room shifted again, growing darker at the edges. The music faded, the guests' laughter turning into low murmurs of uncertainty. A group was gathering at the far end of the ballroom, just past the candlelit tables. A séance table. Lenora's stomach twisted. She recognized the woman at the head of it immediately. A mystic, draped in flowing black veils, her hands adorned with silver rings. Her fingers hovered over a planchette, her eyes closed as she whispered to something unseen. Clara sat beside her, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Lenora stepped closer, straining to hear. "We call upon the spirits of Ravenshade." The mystic's voice was low, melodic. "If there is one among you who still lingers, give us a sign." The room held its breath. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, the planchette moved. Lenora's pulse jumped. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. "What is your name?" the mystic whispered. The planchette glided across the board. Lenora's blood ran cold as she saw the letters forming a name. Evangeline. Clara's breath caught. Lenora could see it now, the way her fingers trembled slightly against the table. She knew the name. And she was afraid. The mystic's eyes snapped open. "Evangeline?" she repeated. "Why do you linger?" The planchette moved again, faster this time. Clara's hands curled into fists. And then, the board spelled out, "Murdar." A ripple of fear moved through the guests. Someone whispered nervously. Then, the candles flickered violently. Clara stood abruptly, her face pale. "This is enough," she said, her voice strained. "We should not be doing this." The mystic turned toward her. "You knew her, did you not?" Clara's lips parted. But before she could answer, the chandelier above them trembled. The entire room shuddered. And a whisper sliced through the air. "Find me." The candles exploded into darkness. Lenora gasped as the vision collapsed. She jerked violently, stumbling backward. The masked man caught her wrist again, steadying her. The vision was gone. The crypt returned, silent and suffocating, its coffins and stone walls unchanged. But Lenora could still hear the whisper. Still feel the weight of what she had seen. She turned sharply toward the masked man. Evangeline was murdered. His head tilted slightly. She was erased. Lenora's breath shook. By who? The masked man was silent. Then, he lifted his gloved hand, pointing toward the silver locket resting atop the midnight blue gown. "The truth is buried in that." Lenora hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached for it. Her fingers closed around the locket, its metal cold as ice. She unclasped it carefully, lifting the tiny hinge. Inside was a folded scrap of parchment. Lenora's stomach tightened as she carefully unfolded it. The ink was faded. But the name written inside was clear. Sebastian Ravenshade. Lenora's breath caught. Before she could react, a loud crash echoed above them. The floorboards shook violently, dust and stone raining from the ceiling. The house groaned, as if something was waking. Lenora and the masked man locked eyes. "He knows you are here." The words had barely left his lips, when the trapdoor above them was torn open. A figure loomed in the doorway. Tall. Shrouded in firelight. And then, Sebastian Ravenshade stepped into the crypt. Edgar Ravenshade stood at the edge of the parlor, his hands clenched into fists. Something felt wrong. The whisper had returned. Not inside his head. But inside the walls. She is with him. She has seen too much. You must stop it before it is too late. Edgar's breath came slow and cold. Because he realized something terrible. The house was not just whispering to him. It was whispering through him. And he was no longer sure whose side he was on. Chapter 12, The Door That Never Opens. The crypt's air was thick, heavy with something unseen yet suffocating. Lenora barely had time to process the name written inside the locket, Sebastian Ravenshade, before the trapdoor above them was wrenched open. A blast of firelight poured into the underground chamber, illuminating the damp stone walls, the forgotten coffins, and the masked stranger standing at Lenora's side. And then, a shadow descended the steps, slow and deliberate. Sebastian Ravenshade. Lenora's breath caught in her throat. This was impossible. She had seen him die. Had watched the fire consume him, had heard the crack of falling beams, had smelled the acrid scent of burning flesh. And yet, he stood before her now. His figure was imposing, draped in a long, black coat, its edges flickering like the dying embers of a once-consuming flame. His dark hair was slicked back, his angular features still as sharp as ever, save for the horrid scar running down the side of his face, a brutal souvenir from the night Black Veil burned. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes gleamed with something dark, something victorious. Lenora took an instinctive step back, her fingers tightening around the locket in her hand. The masked man beside her did not move. Sebastian tilted his head slightly, his voice smooth, deliberate. "You should not have come here, Lenora." The way he said her name sent a cold shudder through her spine. He had never spoken it so intimately before, as if it was no longer merely a name, but a claim. Her mouth was dry, her voice barely escaping her lips. "You're dead." Sebastian's lips curled into a slow, almost amused smile. "Clearly not." His booted foot met the final step, bringing him fully into the crypt. The candlelight flickered wildly against the damp walls, casting shadows that danced unnaturally. "How?" Lenora demanded, forcing herself to hold her ground. Sebastian chuckled, a low, rich sound that did nothing to calm her nerves. "The dead do not always stay buried." His eyes flickered toward the masked man, who remained silent. "And some refuse to remain forgotten." Lenora's heart pounded against her ribs. This was wrong. This was all wrong. The house, the crypt, the whispers, everything had been leading her toward a truth she wasn't ready to face. Sebastian's gaze shifted downward, to the open coffin at her feet, to the midnight blue gown folded inside. His smirk wavered slightly, as if something in that sight unnerved him, even just for a moment. His voice lowered, almost a murmur. "You found her, didn't you?" Lenora's grip tightened around the locket. "Where is she, Sebastian?" For the first time since entering the crypt, something flickered in his expression, a tension that hadn't been there before. The masked man finally moved, stepping forward just slightly. His presence was still, poised, yet filled with an unspoken warning. She does not belong to you, he said, his voice soft yet unwavering. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. And you do? A tense silence settled between them. Lenora swallowed, looking between the two figures. The unspoken war between them was palpable, ancient, something she was only just beginning to understand. Then Sebastian's attention returned to her. It doesn't matter what you believe you've uncovered, Lenora. This house, his voice darkened, is far more than a graveyard of the past. Lenora's breath hitched. Then what is it? Sebastian's smile returned, but this time, it was hollow. A debt unpaid. A bargain broken. A prison that has never forgotten its prisoners. His gaze bore into hers, searching her expression. You were never meant to leave, Lenora. A shiver crawled down her spine. Sebastian took a slow step forward. And neither was I. The candlelight flickered wildly, the walls seeming to breathe around them. The house groaned, an unsettling sound deep within the stone, as if reacting to the words being spoken. Then, a whisper. Soft, distant, yet chillingly clear. He lies. Lenora's chest tightened. The voice came from the locket in her palm. Sebastian's eyes darkened. Give me that. Lenora took a step back. No. His expression flickered, lips parting just slightly, as if hearing her refusal had truly surprised him. You don't understand, he said, his voice lower now, quieter, almost urgent. That locket does not belong to you. If you value your life, you will give it to me. Lenora's fingers curled tightly around it. Then tell me the truth, Sebastian. What happened to Evangeline? Why does her name call from the walls? What did you do? Sebastian exhaled through his nose, his patience cracking. What I had to. That's not an answer, Lenora pressed, her pulse racing. You murdered her, didn't you? A flicker of something dangerous passed through his gaze. But it wasn't rage. It was something else. Something closer to fear. The masked man finally spoke again, his voice colder now, sharper. She was not the only one. Sebastian's expression turned to stone. A sudden, violent gust of air swept through the crypt, the candles snuffing out instantly. The darkness swallowed them whole. Lenora's breath came fast, shallow, her fingers clutching the locket as if it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Then, a new voice. Low. Gravelly. Not Sebastian. Not the masked man. A voice from the walls themselves. You speak of debts unpaid. And yet, your bloodline was the first to bargain. You have come back to settle it, haven't you, Sebastian? A sharp crack echoed through the crypt. The very ground beneath them shuddered violently, as if something ancient and restless had begun to stir. Sebastian's voice was tight, controlled. This is not your concern. A deep, rumbling laugh slithered through the walls. You brought her here. And now, she belongs to the house. Lenora's lungs squeezed painfully as the air grew impossibly thick. Something shifted in the darkness, unseen but felt. A presence closing in. A sudden, sharp clutch at her wrist. Not Sebastian. Not the masked man. Something else. And then, the floor beneath her gave way. Lenora's scream was the last thing that echoed through the crypt before she fell into the abyss below. The darkness swallowed her whole. And Ravenshade House kept its secrets a little longer. Chapter 13, The Silent Veil. Lenora fell, the sensation of weightlessness consuming her as the darkness swallowed her whole. The air around her was thick, suffocating, pressing against her lungs like unseen hands, the void stretching endlessly beneath her. Then came the impact, ice-cold water, shocking and unforgiving, crashing around her body as she plunged deep into its abyss. The breath was stolen from her lungs, her limbs thrashing, struggling against the unseen current that dragged her further into the black depths. The world above was a blur, an unreachable surface where distant light flickered faintly, distorted by the water pressing in on all sides. She kicked, forcing her body upward, her muscles burning, her mind screaming for air, until finally, she broke through, gasping violently as she sucked in a lungful of sharp, damp air. The water around her was still, undisturbed except for the ripples of her own struggle. There was no ceiling above her, no crypt walls enclosing her, only an expanse of endless mist curling over the water's surface like living tendrils, shrouding whatever lay beyond in an unnatural white haze. And then she saw her. Clara Ravenshade stood at the edge of the mist, motionless, her midnight blue gown trailing over the surface of the water without sinking. Her face was calm, composed, but her eyes were filled with something else, an exhaustion that stretched beyond death itself. Lenora took a hesitant step forward, the water cold against her ankles, her breath still uneven from the fall. Clara's voice was soft, barely carried through the heavy silence. "You were not meant to see this place." Lenora swallowed, the words curling around her chest like a phantom's grip. "Where am I?" Clara tilted her head slightly, watching her in a way that made Lenora feel exposed, as if the answer should have already been obvious. "The veil." Lenora stiffened. The veil. The space between what lived and what did not. Between what had been and what still lingered. Her voice barely escaped her lips. "Why am I here?" Clara's expression did not change. "Because the house has chosen you." Lenora shuddered, her pulse hammering. "Chosen me for what?" Clara stepped closer, the mist shifting around her like unseen hands reaching to hold her in place. "To finish what was started." Lenora's fingers curled into fists at her sides. "I don't understand." Clara did not blink. "You will." Then, she reached forward, her fingers ghosting over Lenora's wrist, her touch weightless, almost unreal, but the moment her fingertips brushed against Lenora's skin, the whispers began. A chorus of voices, rising and falling, distant yet unbearably close, tangled in sorrow, in warning, in secrets never spoken aloud. They clawed at her ears, her mind, her very bones. And beneath them all, one voice rose, cutting through the others like a knife. "You hold the key to the past." Lenora's breath caught as Clara's gaze flickered downward, toward the object clenched in her trembling fingers. The locket. It pulsed against her palm, warm now, heavier than before, as though it had absorbed something unseen from the air around them. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "If you open it, the truth will unravel." Lenora's pulse pounded, her grip tightening around the locket as she lifted it, her fingernail pressing against the tiny hinge. A part of her screamed not to turn back, to wake, to run. But another part of her, a deeper, darker part, knew she had already stepped too far into the unknown to return. Slowly, carefully, she began to pry it open, only for a hand to seize her wrist. She gasped, jerking back, her body stiffening as she twisted sharply. But it was not Clara. It was someone else. A tall figure loomed behind her, draped in black, his presence too still, too composed, as though he had been waiting. The masked stranger. His gloved fingers remained firm around her wrist, his grip cold, but not cruel. His voice was steady, calm, but final. "Not yet." Lenora tried to pull away, but the moment she looked into the void of the mask's gaze, something inside her stilled, something deeper than fear, something ancient. Clara's expression was unreadable as she turned toward the masked man, as if she recognized him, as if she had always known he would be here. A silent understanding passed between them before Clara's gaze returned to Lenora. "He is right." The words sank deep, heavy and absolute. The whispers in the mist stirred, their urgency rising, pressing against her skull, but Clara's voice remained calm, steady, sad. "The truth must be taken carefully, Lenora." And once you open that locket completely, there will be no turning back. Lenora's chest rose and fell, too fast, too uneven, as if her own body was rejecting the reality laid before her. Then why show me this? Clara's sorrow deepened. Because you needed to see. The mist thickened around them, the whispers becoming unbearable, suffocating, reaching for her, warning her. Clara stepped back, her figure beginning to fade. Leave this place, Lenora. Wake up before the house takes you. The masked man's grip loosened, and suddenly, the world collapsed. The mist ripped away like smoke in the wind, the ground vanished beneath her, her body plummeting backward through time, through memory, through something unseen, until her lungs filled with air once more, and she woke with a violent gasp. The crypt was cold. The damp scent of stone and earth returned, grounding her in reality, yet something had changed. The masked man was gone. The whispers had silenced. But the locket in her hand had fully opened. And inside, beneath Sebastian's name, another name had appeared. The ink was faint, aged, nearly lost to time. But it was clear enough. Edgar Ravenshade. Lenora's breath stilled, her fingers trembling as the weight of the truth settled over her like a shroud. Then, footsteps above. Slow. Measured. Drawing closer. And then Edgar's voice, distant but sharp. Lenora. She turned toward the sound, her heart hammering, but for the first time since arriving at Ravenshade House, she was no longer sure she could trust the man who called her name.
Every story has an ending, but some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.